Hey, everybody. Thank you for coming. So many people, so exciting. We are going to give this another minute and then get started just so people have a moment to join. Wow, I see people from all over, people from India. It's so late for you. Bulgaria. I see people from, let's see. Um, oh, shoot. I can't tell even what some of these, let's see, is that Montana? I see a lot of people from I see Poland, Canada. Canada's in the house. So many from India, US, Great Britain. All right. We've given everyone a minute and I'm going to get us started. So, welcome everyone to this session of testing with XCUITest and Espresso. I'm Wendy Zinger, and I'm happy to welcome you to another exciting TestMu conference session. And we are going to dive in here, as I said, to XCUITest and Espresso, these powerful frameworks that are really revolutionizing how we approach mobile test automation. And our speaker is Kevin Lee. Kevin is based in the Bay Area, and he serves as an associate QA engineer at Veeva Systems. During his time at Veeva, he's played a role in advancing the company's testing capabilities with his leadership in integrating LambdaTest with mobile XCUI and Espresso frameworks. As a recent grad of Wichita State University in Kansas, he's kicked off his career innovating with these mobile frameworks. He's got a lot to talk about, and give him a big, big shout out as someone who's kicking off his career, showing and sharing what he's done and what he's learned. So with this session, you're going to learn a lot about native mobile testing tools, stable and performant tests, and how they can be leveraged to create that. I'm just excited to hear more. And I do want to say a couple of housekeeping items. Please drop any questions you have in the Q&A, and we'll handle those at the end. If there are comments, put them in the comment section, and let's get started and unlock the full potential of mobile testing with XCUITest and Espresso.
Hello, everybody. Yes, thank you, Wendy, for that awesome introduction. My name is Kevin Lee, and I will be presenting you guys with the iOS and Android native frameworks XUI and Espresso. Today, we'll be talking a little bit about some of the integrations, the architecture, and possible cloud testing structures with LambdaTest today. But before we get started, a little bit about me. I am a recent graduate with a bachelor's in computer science. I've had a few software engineering internships at companies like Textron and Enovar. Funny enough, they're both aviation companies. And after I graduated, I landed a career in QA engineering at Veeva Systems. One of the projects I've been working on, helping with, is the LambdaTest integrations for XUI and Espresso for Veeva. And yeah, that's a little bit about my background, and a little personal factoid about me is that I really like physical fitness. I try to run as much as I can. I just got into running and it's been about 4 months now, and I love working out as well. I used to actually powerlift for my high school, um, but nowadays it's been more of a recreational hobby. So yeah, just a little fun fact about me. But enough about me. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of this presentation. Um, Starting with Appium and native frameworks. I'm just going to define a few terms here. If you don't know already, which I'm going to assume that most of you do know about these topics, considering you chose to attend this presentation, which I'm very grateful for. But if you don't know, Appium is essentially a tool for automating mobile application tests, and this allows you to write tests that kind of simulate user interactions across a lot of different devices and operating systems. And it's great because it kind of is easy to use in the sense that it simplifies the process of testing different mobile apps by providing kind of um, a more unified framework, and in the sense that it is able to test a bunch of different apps with a lot of different language flexibilities. Um, So yeah, it supports a lot of multiple programming languages and development environments. So that's why a lot of people tend to use Appium. But for native frameworks like XCUITest and Espresso, these are native test frameworks that are directly built into iOS and the Android stack. So running them in-house tends to be a bit more convenient and quick. Um, so yeah, now that we've defined some of the terms there, if you didn't know what Appium and native, what different native frameworks were, I'll go into a few of the points here that I've listed and describe some of the features between the two. So some of the advantages of Appium is that it's cross-platform. It's got a lot of language flexibility. So that means it's generally a lower learning curve because it uses a WebDriver-based concept approach, whatever you call it. And a lot of web developers are familiar with this. So it's a lot easier to onboard testers with a broader skill set. It's also open source. And then in the last bullet point, um, it doesn't require you to modify your app at all. And what I mean by that is that Appium doesn't require any changes to your app code or any recompilation. And this helps you maintain the integrity of your app when you test. So yeah, some advantages of the native frameworks is that you have a lot of more control, and this essentially makes you it allows you to speed up your testing. And some key advantages of this is like accessing system APIs, and some of that gives you control over the user interactions that you might have on a day-to-day with a device. So you can replicate user interactions like swiping, pinching, long presses, and you can also manipulate system settings with these APIs. You can modify device settings like the network, the location, the accessibility options for a bunch of different testing environment scenarios. And then you can also interact with hardware components, things like control sensors, cameras, other hardware devices for specialized testing. I know you can upload a QR code into like the camera essentially, and it'll scan it and it'll open the link. Um, so there's a lot of things you can do if you used a native framework. And then the last bullet point of the first topic, at least, um, is accessing system information. And things like OS version, screen resolution, battery level um, can all be obtained for test environment setups and different data collection. Um, some examples of these system APIs is like for iOS, you have the XCTest framework, which provides access to those UI elements, and then you can also access the system events like notifications, and then all the different device capabilities. For Android, we have UI Automator for system level APIs and UI elements. UI Automator is just another Android native framework, but Espresso is also one. It solely focuses on UI testing. And into the next bullet point, performance optimization. You have a lot of control over like the network conditions. You can simulate network speeds to test app behavior under various conditions. With it, you could also reduce a lot of UI interactions, like unnecessary taps. You can minimize like certain interactions, like swipes that aren't really useful to you. Sometimes you'll accidentally open a tab while you're swiping somewhere. This basically minimizes that. And then efficient object identification is useful because you can use specific performant locators and avoid a lot of unnecessary UI element searches. It creates a very specific search when you're trying to find an element. So those are the kind of the reasons why, or at least the differences maybe of Appium and native frameworks. But why XCUITest and Espresso? Um, well, it's like having expertise in like one area. Typically, if you think about it like a developer would, they become well versed in something like Swift or Java. And so becoming an expert in one testing framework is similar in the sense that you'll become more knowledgeable in that specific platform. Um, Not to mention that all the tests are also in the same code repository as the application under test. And so they all kind of talk the same language and it's really easy to access that way. Um, so yeah, moving on, now that you have a general idea of what it's like testing with native frameworks, I just wanted to highlight some of the cool integrations that you can implement with LambdaTest. Um, and if you haven't been running tests through Xcode or Android Studio, then this might be useful knowledge for you. So starting off, we have test plan enablement. This is an iOS feature. I believe this is a fairly new feature, and it basically allows you to sort of edit your configuration file on Xcode, and then you can pick and choose from whichever or however many test plans that you've stored in Xcode. And with these test plans, you're able to switch on and off between test plans and enable or disable whichever tests in that test plan as well. I'll show you here in a little bit later in the presentation, but um, this is kind of just like an overall like explanation. When you're integrating with your CI/CD, you can edit this file, the configuration file. It's kind of a YAML file. It's hyperxq.yaml if you haven't heard of it, such that you have a specified scenario for each use case. So say I wanted to test UI testing or unit testing or backend testing. It makes it really easy to kind of pick and choose which test plan you want with all the activated and disabled tests on there. So that's really cool. And then another feature is the ability to flip on and off when LambdaTest wants to re-sign our application. Um, and if you don't know this already, Apple requires app signatures that are signed with provisioning profiles and certificates that are given through Apple. And this makes sure that the iOS apps can be installed and run properly on real devices. Um, and this makes it so that you're up to date with Apple's guidelines. You're maintaining all the security precautionary guidelines as well. And it also just makes it like compatible with whatever you're testing on. This process is pretty important because um, testing and validating different applications in a cloud-based testing environment like LambdaTest, because we're running on Apple's physical devices. So some testing platforms re-sign the app for you, and they don't allow you to keep the signature on the application for iOS. And with this feature, we're able to verify the integrity ourselves while running them on LambdaTest devices. So that's really cool. But um, that wraps up app resign. And then for the last one, this one's an Android one. It's a really cool Gradle plugin, essentially, that I personally just found out about. So I thought I'd include it here as well. And it's a Gradle integration plugin that's really simple if you worked with Gradle before and have used HyperExecute. Um, but if not, you can essentially configure the test runs right within your Gradle file of the application, further integrating it in your Android repository. So rather than choosing a different test plan device OS from a different hyperexecute.yaml file or something like that, you can actually dictate what it targets in your Gradle file. Um, and that's also really useful because it allows you to run parallelly with LambdaTest. You can run on multiple devices because um, I don't believe Android Studio natively supports that yet, but um, with LambdaTest you're able to. So that's really cool. So now that you can kind of already assume a lot of the things that you can do with LambdaTest, it's really powerful when you combine it with CI/CD. LambdaTest takes this a little further when testing with native frameworks. Like for example, people oftentimes use various cloud services like GitLab, Azure, AWS to run various tests, UI tests, unit tests, whatever you're testing on. But when testing with real devices, there are plenty of ways you can automate the process of building, uploading, and then running tests. Um, and with Hyper Execute, all you have to do is download the executable, and then with a configuration file, you can edit exactly how it's going to run. And the test will begin to upload and then run on LambdaTest. So scripting the entire build, upload, and run process is fairly simple. Um, And then once you're done with that, once it's running, you can also use the APIs provided by LambdaTest to parse and print onto whatever cloud platform you're using for even easier debugging and analysis. So with that in mind, there's a lot of things that can be covered if you automate the entire build, upload, and running procedure, like running specific tests for commits or merge requests, you name it. And then for another example, um, in Xcode, this is the test plan feature that I mentioned earlier. And this allows users to turn on and off certain tests for different given scenarios. And this is how you would kind of integrate it in your CI/CD pipeline. But this is kind of how you toggle the test plan. To integrate it is to script the entire process with hyperexecute. So this is kind of the way that you would toggle it. Here's a photo of what it would look like. Toggling a test is simple as clicking a button. Right there it says enabled, and if I click the boxes under that, it'll disable or enable another test. And then it makes the necessary code changes for you to push so that you don't have to keep doing this over and over again. I can also switch test plans. So if I just clicked on the test plan and changed it like so, so I'm clicking the test plan here and then I'm switching it. As you can see, like the tests are, there's only one disabled and there's 3 tests total. If I go to the next one, you can see that there's that, oh, I guess I already clicked on it there, but I did switch to a different test plan. Um, I was on test plan 1 and now I'm on 2. So if I wanted to switch from, say, like a unit UI test plan to a unit test plan, it'd be as simple as that. And then you would upload it to hyperexecute and it would take whatever tests that are on it. So to further automate it, hyperexecute allows you to upload test plans and then it returns an application ID for you to use. So it's just like uploading an application or a test suite, except it's a test plan. So if you wanted to, you could have 10 different test plans to run at any given time. And all you have to do is switch the application ID of the test plan in your hyperexecute.yaml. And then after you've done that, you've basically just selected a bunch of different tests like I just showed. So that's it for iOS. I know Android doesn't support test plans like Xcode does. However, LambdaTest does also allow you to use the hyperexecute YAML to choose specific tests using the hyperexecute executable. And if you're using LambdaTest as well, you can use it parallelly, which Android Studio doesn't support natively. So yeah, to recap, we've talked a little bit about the advantages of Appium and native frameworks, the different integrations that you can do with it. We've talked about the test plan configurations. You saw how I was choosing different test plans just now. The app re-sign feature, which was useful in the sense that you could keep your own signature on there. The Gradle plugin with Android, and then you can see a couple of the ways that you can speed up the process is in your CI/CD pipelines with LambdaTest and hyperexecute using the native frameworks. So yeah, I just wanted to keep this one short and simple. It's pretty easy to integrate, which is why this was really short. And so I'll kind of leave the floor to any questions and answers now. Thank you all for attending today's presentation on XCUI and Espresso. I hope you guys all learned something. I hope I persuaded you to kind of join the native framework team if you are able to. And yeah.
Awesome, really good. And there are some great questions. So I am going to pop over to the Q&A section right now and just sort of shoot those over. And let's see. Why don't we start with this one? And by the way, I will preface this by saying, Kevin may or may not have the answer on the fly to these. So just want to give you the sort of, let's say, understanding that if we can't get answers here today, we will follow up because all of these are being recorded and stored. So if we don't have an answer for your question, Mahesh, we will definitely be following up, and for others that come along as well. I'm not sure, Kevin, do you think you can speak to this one?
Yeah, what strategies can be used to ensure consistent test results across different devices and OS versions when using LambdaTest with XCUITest and Espresso? Um, so some of the strategies, I guess, methods, some things you could just like look out for would be things like I don't know, comprehensive test coverage in the sense that like you can use LambdaTest's device farm to run tests on a wide range of real devices and OSs to capture kind of like the variability in hardware and software environments. Um, you can identify issues that might only appear under specific conditions that aren't seen in things like simulators. Um, And you can also have standardized like testing environments. Um, it's really customizable in the sense that you can control essentially every part of your testing environment. So standardized test environment would be really helpful as well. Um, just a lot of different things you can do. Lambda test has because you can edit all the configuration files like hyper execute, and then when you switch to a native framework, you have a lot more control because of those system APIs. So yeah, it's also really nice to kind of look at the test results in Lambda test. They have a really good dashboard for like analysis and you can catch certain tests that are flaky during a certain time of year, maybe. Maybe it was a leap year. It's great to always look back at the logs and kind of pinpoint how you can make your tests more reliable. And and yeah, I would say some of those strategies would be um, pretty useful for everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm going to, I hope that was a good answer, and I'm going to keep going with another question. I hope that answered your question, in other words, Mahesh. And let's move here. Um, there was a question about GitHub repositories, and I mean, I think I'm going to say, Kevin, you work for a company that maybe has, maybe you contribute to some open source repositories, but for the most part, I'm going to guess that whatever you've built is proprietary. Having said that, at LambdaTest, we have GitHub repositories of tests that you can definitely tap into. You can also find them in many different open source repositories out there. So I hope that answers that question. I don't know, Kevin, do you have any comments on where you may have learned some good tips and tricks?
Um, no GitHub repositories specifically, but Lambda Test's documentation does have a few GitHub repositories where you can kind of see the formatting of what a hyperexecute YAML would look like, or any other configuration files that you might need. Um, and I think that was part of um, the struggles to kind of get this implemented. And so providing the resources to see and edit how the syntax should look like was really useful. But no GitHub repositories. Um, yeah, so sorry about that.
No, that's great. All right, let me put another question out here. And this is from Paul. Um, and I'll let you read that.
What technical debt with testing may be involved with using native frameworks versus Appium? Um, I do know that with native frameworks, it's a lot more oversight. You kind of have to keep an eye on it a little more. Um, but in terms of technical debt, you do have multiple code bases using native frameworks like XCUITest for iOS and then Espresso for Android means maintaining two separate test suites. And so this can kind of increase maintenance efforts, as you may know. Um, but each platform evolves differently. And so I would say the biggest struggle there is requiring to test different OSs for different devices. And then some other ones, I'd say for kind of like these frameworks, they're kind of limited to their platforms. Um, but if your product spans both platforms, you can't really reuse test scripts across them, and this might lead to increased development and maintenance time. Um, but overall, I think your test executions will be a lot quicker. You have more control over the environment, and so there's like less flakiness. So there is a kind of a trade-off there. Um, but the learning curve and expertise is 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 better in that sense as well. Each framework requires like specific knowledges and expertise, which can contribute to the technical debt if there is a turnover in the team or a lack of skilled tests familiar with these frameworks. Um, so yeah, I hope that was a good enough answer.
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to show the
Thank
next
you.
question. All right. Let's do this one.
We are leveraging XCUITest for testing iOS applications. Can you please let us know how easy it is or difficult it is to migrate to a platform like LambdaTest? Um, I would say personally, for me, um, it was it was difficult in the sense that I had never really met with any platforms like cloud testing platforms, and so I had to figure all of that out. But I think the Lambda test documentation is good enough. It's adequate to be able to kind of do it by yourself. And so if you have a team working on it or something like that, I think you wouldn't really have an issue with it. The only things that you would have to consider would be, I think, how it translates to, say, like your pipelines, if you have anything like that, or the amount of tests that you are required to test, um, kind of like the coverage of each feature or application that you're testing. Um, integration is probably the actual task of um, creating the scripts and the pipelines and stuff like that isn't as hard as knowing where your true like test um, points are, if that makes sense. Your areas of testing. Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. I will add that um, my customer success team is always happy to help anyone who's trying to do this. But this is not an advertisement for Lambda Test. So it is a talk about XCUI testing. And I'm going to go to the next question. And thank you for asking that, Brandy. All right. Um, I don't know if Manoj, there's a question here that I may be missing a piece of. Um, hmm. I think I'm missing a piece of that, so I'm going to skip that one unless you could clarify it. Um, and yeah, I think, hold on, I think, I think we've covered most of the questions. There were just two about, what are some GitHub repositories? So it clearly seems like people are interested to try this out and interested to to test with native frameworks just based on the kind of questions we're getting. So what I would say is, our community and people like Kevin can help. I don't want to volunteer you, but at the same time, we here and the community at large, I think, is here to help. So if you are interested to try, reach out and we can help. There is a new question here. Um, I'm going to show this. I'm not 100% sure, Raju Kumar, if this is something that we have the answer for here. But go for it, Kevin. I
How
think
can we
actually,
achieve? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah. No, I'm this is not 100% related to your topic, so maybe I'll take this one, Kevin. But maybe you
Okay.
can speak to it. Go for it.
Implementing CI/CD for apps in lower environments. Uh, I assume you're talking about like development or like staging. Um, I think most importantly, you would kind of need like version control integrations, automated builds, things like you can use like Jenkins, Circle CI, GitLab CI, um, automated builds in the sense that like with every code commit, you should be able to trigger an automated build, and then the app will be built without any errors consistently. That'll be pretty useful. And then after you've figured out the automated builds, you want to um, implement an automated testing strategy. You want to maybe you would include unit tests, um, UI tests, and end tests. Um, Other things to consider might be um, environment specific configurations. I'm not entirely sure what kind of application you're working on, but a lot of these things are probably the harder things to address. Implementing them is as easy as reading documentation, but to determine where the testing areas are and achieving that in a lower um, environment all starts with um, a lot of the documentation and training to get to those automated builds or those automated uh, testing environments. Um, I hope that was okay. I think I got your question right. Um, I hope I was able to answer that correctly.
I think one follow on to that might be, Kevin, that if you are testing in the cloud somehow, there's going to be a way that you need to configure to reach the app in the lower environment. And this is an app build that's still not exposed, right? So, you've mentioned that you're using hyper execute. So, how is that playing into how is that playing into your connectivity before the app is public in the lower environment?
Um, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that one more time?
Oh, well, maybe I'm not phrasing it correctly. I think that part of the answer for you maybe that the hyper execute setup is already kind of set up to give you a framework to test in for apps that are behind your firewall. Is that true? I may not know the answer. I'm just guessing here.
Oh yeah. So it's really easy. We kind of just it LambdaTest makes it really easy to do. All you have to do is download the hyperexecute um, configuration file and then the executable itself, and then as long as you can get your pipelines to run that, you're able to um, run your tests wherever, and that's as simple as downloading it, uploading it, and running it. Um, in terms of like a firewall, though, Lambda tests also includes a tunneling system, and so you could also include that in your continue or in your CI/CD pipelines, um, and it's also more secure that way. Um, yeah,
Cool.
I think that
All
was.
right. And our last question, which is really more of a comment, is the war of the test frameworks, which I think is funny. And there always will be different test frameworks for different purposes and different skill sets and reasons. And I think you hit on those really nicely. So if there are no further questions, I will wrap us up. And let me just make sure I touch on a few final items. So first, thank you so much, Kevin. I think this was a really good way for us to get exposed to XCUITest, Espresso, reasons for using them, and how you might put them in place. Thanks for making time for all the questions. I do want to remind folks as you peel off, we have a number of partner booths still active, so please do go during this break time and engage with those partner booths. This is going to be recorded, so if you missed it or if you want to share it with others, do note that it will be on YouTube and will be recorded. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and rest of the conference. Thank you all so much.
Thank you everyone for joining.